When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing clinical social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 12. The hidden truths came to light, and then fun happened. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. I now introduce our guest, Rahim Printer. Rahim is a national award-winning human resources leader who has many years of experience working in the hospitality industry. Most recently, he has found his purpose in life coaching, where he guides others to overcome adversity and live their legacy. Rahim is a proud member of the LGBTQ community and advocates for individuals having difficulty coming out to their families. In his spare time, he loves CrossFit and spending time with his partner Dylan and fur baby Winnie. He is extremely approachable and fun to chat with. So, if there is anything more you wish to learn about Rahim, he says, just ask. Rahim, so good to have you here. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Salima.
Oh, yes. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. And I also really appreciate so much that you bring with you this willingness to share. And I'm so grateful for your support in taking a stance to help break barriers of mental stigma.
Yeah, I know it's definitely something that's so dear to my heart. And to know that I get to sit here with you and even just share my story and chat for a little bit brings me so much joy. I feel so excited about it. Thank you.
Oh, my goodness. Now I'm getting really excited as well. As you know, Rahim, this podcast, it's all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether it's directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And so we also know that no matter what the story is, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which remains tucked away. So that's what this platform is all about. It's to serve in a way to break the barriers of mental stigma that has been conditioned in our society.
I love it. Love it, love it, love it.
Amazing. And so, this conversation that we're going to have today, I hope, is really to set the tone for people to share and tell what typically people have reluctance for exposing. So I'm on a community mission here as well to set a new trend and reframe. I like to call this the mental beauty rethink. What do you think about it?
Oh, I love it. I think both of us come from fairly similar backgrounds and communities. And I think that so much of what's been preached to us, even as young children, is, don't show weakness, like don't let anyone know that you're going through something. And a lot of us really hold on to that. And we try to portray our life as just so perfect and everything is so great. And we don't talk about the challenges that we have. And I think that really hinders us from being able to connect to one another and realize that we are so similar. So I love that you're doing this podcast. And to me, it's just so important to open the floodgates and make sure that people know that they're not alone, that they're not alone in their struggles. And we all have a different story, but a story that definitely involves mental health and involves stuff that's difficult and challenging for sure.
You said it so well, and I really like your reference to open the floodgates, because that's exactly what I'm hoping happens over time, is that people get comfortably uncomfortable and come forward and share with willingness. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And you're definitely making me comfortable.
Okay, shall we get to it?
Let's do it.
All right, sounds good. Let's start with the first question, Rahim. Give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. How would it read?
Wow, a newspaper title. I think it would read, "A Big Rainbow Illuminates After a Long Storm." How does that sound?
A big rainbow illuminates after a long storm?
Yes.
Okay, so unpack that one for me. Say more about this title.
I think the rainbow is really important to me. It is something that is I've always liked rainbows, even as a little kid, and I guess I didn't really know why, other than I think most kids like rainbows because they're colorful. But I think when I think of when you think of a storm coming about, you're kind of like, oh no, like this is going to be so difficult and so challenging. And you can get a beautiful, beautiful rainbow, and you wouldn't have gotten that if you hadn't had this storm. So for me, it really signifies the fact that you have to go through some challenging times in order to really, in my opinion, live a life of purpose and legacy, and all of that is important. And if you don't experience pain and you don't experience difficult times, I don't know how much you can appreciate the good times.
That is so great. What a great title. Wow. I'm hearing exactly what you're saying here. This rainbow is a really big symbol for you. To achieve that rainbow, you only can achieve that when you go through that storm, right? And if it's a long storm, a big storm, a heavy storm, however it is, but the rainbow can be really big. Okay, Rahim, let's get to your untold story. What is it all about?
My untold story has to do with a rainbow, to be honest. So I guess I'll start from the beginning and just quickly take you through my life as if you're watching a movie. So
okay.
I grew up in Toronto, born and raised in a really small family. It's myself, my dad, my mom, and my older sister, who's 2 years older than me. We were raised in a family where there was so much love. There wasn't a lot of money, but there was a lot of love. So I didn't really need the money. It wasn't until you start going to your friends' houses and you start going to places that you realize, I don't really have a lot.
Right.
But there was always an abundance of love. But there was lots of sacrifice that came with that love, in the sense of, I think my parents really sacrificed quite a bit in order to protect us as children. So, immigrant family coming to Canada, as many Canadians have that sort of beautiful story. And my mom stopped working when I was born. So now it was myself and my sister that were in the household, and she kind of sacrificed her career because she wanted to make sure that we were raised properly, that we didn't lose our culture. It was really, really important for her to raise her kids. She didn't want her kids to be raised by a nanny or a daycare. And she really wanted to have a lot of influence there, which was really great. And I tell this part because that notion of kind of sacrifice and living through your children, I think, is really important in my story. But my story really has to do with, even just being a little kid, like knowing that I was different and knowing that the things I wanted were often talked about quite a bit. Like I remember eavesdropping on some conversations where like my mom was chatting with my aunt or my mom was chatting with my grandparents, and they were talking about whether or not it was okay to like let me play with dolls, or whether or not it was okay to like let me want to wear some of the clothes that were my sister's clothes. Or there was all these conversations, and I never really understood the big deal. Like I remember thinking like, why is this a big deal? Why I just want to play with this doll? Why is this a big deal? But I remember the conversations got pretty heated where my dad's like, no son of mine is going to be, wearing this or playing with this. And, almost people having to say, well, he's going to turn out to be a great father. He's going to be a great husband. He's going to, it's almost like justifying that it would help me be a great heterosexual father. But
Rahim, I have a
yeah, sorry.
question for you. Sorry, I
Of
didn't mean to
course.
interrupt.
No, please jump in.
Do you recall how old you were, like, at that time? Like, when you were overhearing these phone calls or hearing your father say these things to your mom? Like, how old were you?
I honestly was very young. I remember being like 4 or 5 years old. I think around
Really?
junior
Okay.
kindergarten, senior kindergarten. Yeah.
Okay, so your memory does go all the way back to the age 4 or 5.
Yeah. Lucky that way. I can hold on to extra long grudges. Lucky me. um, but yeah, I remember these conversations and I remember just feeling like I needed to justify what I wanted to everyone around me. It wasn't just okay for me to just be, I needed to explain myself. And that was, kind of frustrating, I think.
Mhm.
But I was still very confident as a kid when it came to it. But it wasn't until I went to school and started to experience like bullying and people calling me out for it that I kind of at that point started to feel unsafe. Like with my family, it's
Mhm.
not that I would never felt unsafe. I always felt like this is maybe something they don't want me to do, but I
Right.
never felt like there would be repercussions if I
Mhm.
did it. So there
Right.
was a moment for like almost preservation reasons that I felt like, okay, I need to not take dolls around with me. Dolls became like teddy bears. And then even
Mhm.
that was kind of a, why do you have a teddy bear? So then now teddy bears
Mhm.
weren't a thing as much either. And I remember kind of feeling like, oh, I don't really know how to be. And I remember as a kid, the kids kind of saying, oh, well, why do you sound like that? Like you talk like a girl. I used to hear that quite a bit. You talk like a girl. And I actually remember times, and this is probably when I was a little bit older, where I
Mhm.
remember myself in the mirror, Salima, like practicing my voice, like
Really?
practicing how to make my voice more manly. And I would keep like saying like, and I still remember to this day, like it was almost like I was grunting, like I was trying to be like
Mhm.
hyper masculine and almost change my voice, like change what I sounded like because I was afraid that if I didn't, that I would be a target and that I could potentially be
Mhm.
in danger. So that kind of shaped the beginning parts of my life. And I was just at that point, I kind of knew I needed to keep me a secret. I didn't know at that point that I was gay, but I knew that at that point that something was different about me and that I had to suppress it because not even my parents were okay with it. Like no one was okay with it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I went down the process of, really making myself masculine. I dated women. It was really important for me to be very like I guess passing as someone who was
Mhm.
heterosexual. So that's what I did. I did that even though I didn't feel like it was very true to me. And
Mhm.
a lot of my core values have to do with being trustworthy and being someone who is honest. And I felt like I
Mhm.
was I was lying. I was living a lie. So that was really difficult for me. There was a religious component as well too, because my parents were very religious and were Muslims, and I just felt like in every aspect, like who I was wrong. So
Mhm.
that was challenging. I didn't come out to myself until I was quite a bit older. I was in denial about it for a while. I think I really truly came out to myself when I was probably in my 20s. I was probably about 21 years old, I would say,
Okay.
when I was dating a girl at the time and realized like I can't continue with this. It just
Mhm.
didn't feel right for me. And I felt
Right.
like I needed to end that relationship. And really at that point I knew I couldn't date another girl. It didn't feel right. It
Okay.
felt like I just knew a little bit more than I did before. So I felt like I was starting a relationship based on a lie, and that didn't feel okay for me.
Right.
So I, came out to myself and I started to explore and go out within the gay community or the LGBTQ community. And it was really nice to go out. I genuinely, Slima, felt like I found my wings and I was
Mhm.
able to fly. And I genuinely felt like me. I could be myself, which felt so freeing and so beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my heart was going out for a second when you were talking about
Mhm.
just being torn when you were talking about your core values and this trustworthy component and honesty and how you felt like you were lying and telling yourself that who I am is wrong. Like that part really got to me. What was that like for you?
It was hard. It's interesting. You almost don't think about values until you're older, and I think it's almost like in hindsight now I'm looking back on it. But it
Mm-hmm.
was a very difficult time for sure. I was just honestly, I was lying to everyone. I became like an expert liar. I was lying to one group of friends, saying that I was with one group, lying to my parents, saying that I was with these people when I wasn't. Like no one knew where I was. I was very much just constantly trying to tell lies and trying to keep up with them, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, when you're telling so many, you start to lose track of like what's true, what's not. And you're really trying to find yourself at that point too. Like I was in such a transitionary part of my life, and I
Mm-hmm.
was very lost. I remember feeling very, very down and very sad at a lot of times, and I felt like I was drinking quite a bit during that time period. I
Mm-hmm.
think in university, naturally, if you're someone who drinks, you drink anyways. But I felt like I was numbing quite a bit. I was trying to numb what I was truly going through, and I was just trying to be happy with who I was. But I didn't love it. Didn't love who I was.
And did you ever get caught in the lie?
Oh my God, yes. Multiple times. And I would just think of another one. Like I became like so good. I felt like I could just be a con artist. Like I could have just changed my identity sleep. I was literally
Mm-hmm.
such a good liar. I felt like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Catch Me If You Can. Like I
Yep.
felt like I was that guy. Like it was like I
Oh my
was
goodness.
this master manipulator. But yeah, I definitely got caught in lies for sure. I got, it's around the time of like social media really picking up. And I remember getting tagged in a photo on Facebook, and I was
Mm-hmm.
really, really close to another guy. And the girl my ex that I had dated for years, gave me a call and said, I saw this picture of you. And I was like, oh no, like, what am I going to do? And I was trying to think of how I needed to lie my way out of it. And I remember her giving me my lie. She was like, do you have a drinking problem? And I was like, yeah. Yeah, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
do. I was like, drinking problem is way better than being gay. So this is the lie I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna tell at this point. So yeah, definitely
Mm-hmm.
got caught slamming those lies.
And so when you say that you were in your early 20s when you came out to yourself, and through that whole process, all of this lying and manipulating and all of these things that you were sort of engaging in, I mean, it was still to protect yourself, right? Like that was your safety net, right?
Mhm.
At what point were you able to feel solid enough to actually let your family know and really come out to your family?
I think what really helped me was to have people around me that were also part of my community. It all kind of happened like
Mm-hmm.
working in retail. So I worked a retail job, and I mean there was lots of people that were part of my community at the store that I was working at, and it really helped me to really normalize the fact that it's not like I was having urges. It was who
Mm-hmm.
I was. It was like
Mm-hmm.
really realizing that this wasn't like a choice thing. It was well, this is who I am. All these other people are just like me, and
Mm-hmm.
they're going through a really similar struggle. And, some of them had really come to terms with it and come out to their families. And for some of them, it was easy. They came out very young, or they were
Mm-hmm.
asked by their parents if they were, and they said yes, and their parents accepted them right away. And, you hear of all these amazing stories. So, yeah, and I had a partner as well too that was a few years older than me that was going through a really similar thing. So it kind of helped to have someone to kind of go along the journey with me, even though I do feel like coming out is such a personal journey.
Of
It was
course.
nice to have someone that was kind of, at the same time coexisting and having that same journey. So I came out to my parents when I was 25. So it took a few years for me to really be comfortable with myself until I felt confident. When I first I came out as like I'm bisexual, and then slowly it came to me realizing that I wasn't. I do identify as a queer gay man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it wasn't until I was 25 that I came out to my parents. And I can tell you about that story if that's, if you want to hear about that, because that in itself was a lot.
Yeah, go for it. It sounds like you're warmed up for it anyway.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was a really difficult conversation. I've never been so prepared for something. I literally had a note in my phone, and I literally laid down exactly how I was going
Mm-hmm.
to do this. Like it was a meeting. I told them I needed to talk to them, and it was important, and it had to be that night. So I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
chicken out and not do it. I was very strategic about it. But I remember, and I'll paint the picture. We were sitting we live in a really small apartment, and it was in the living room. And my sister, who had already known, was there as support, and she was sitting there. My parents didn't know that she knew, but she was there supporting me, which was really great to have her. I was sitting on the coffee table. My parents were sitting on the couch, and I was like really physically close to them and just telling them the story. And I did it in a way where I talked about my achievements, and I talked about the things that I knew that they were really proud of about me.
Right.
And I asked them, like, were you proud then? And they were like, yes, yes, yes. And then it was time to say that I was gay, and I couldn't utter the words. Like, it was so difficult for me to say it. And I was getting really, I didn't want to get emotional because I didn't want to lose sight of the message I needed to get across. And so I just started talking about as a kid and, being in mosque and praying that it would get better and praying that I could be different, and kind of walking them through being bullied and what that was like, because they actually had no idea. I really kept that all a secret. And then into where I was then, and that I was in a relationship with a man, and they knew him. They thought we were just friends. And the whole time, like, my dad would not look at me. You could tell he was really, really uncomfortable, and he was just staring away from me. And I knew he wasn't going to take it well. He showed all the signs from the very beginning. He asked me some really offensive things that really hurt my feelings. And yeah, it was hard. It was like this whole thing. And everyone said, like, a weight's going to be lifted off your shoulders and you're going to feel amazing. And I didn't feel amazing. I didn't feel great.
What did it feel like when you received those offensive remarks from your dad, or even like whether the questions were like rhetorical or not? Like, how did you respond, or how did it make you feel as well?
It was hard. I tried to not react and yell or turn, because I really wanted the conversation to be civil. I wanted it to be about my heart and my feelings and what was truly in my heart, and not, I didn't want to get into like a big like drama fest, and I didn't want screaming, or I didn't want my memory of my coming out to be something that was so painful in like a explosive kind of way. But it was hard. It was hard not to react, because naturally I'm a very fiery person. I really get that from my mother, and it was hard for me not to to scream back or try to defend myself. But I just knew in that moment that the questions that my dad was asking was because he was hurt, and he felt blindsided. So it was his stuff. It wasn't my stuff. So knowing that, I found was helpful.
It sounds like you really focused on the goal of the conversation. And like you said, you went into this conversation really prepared. And it seems like you were laser focused. You knew exactly, this is what my target is. So anything else that comes like on the sidelines, I'm going to just have to let it roll off, because I've got to stay focused on this mission.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm hearing you say.
That.
And it's also nice to hear that you can say like, yeah, I noticed that it was his reaction. So I kind of recognized I had to keep space for him to have his reactions, because he's going to have his own process. And whether he's hurt, blindsided, or whatever, he clearly needed some processing time.
Like, I heard this one thing that someone said to me before I came out, and it really stood with me. And I'm curious if it will resonate with anyone else. But the quote was, "When you come out of the closet, you put your parents in one, and now they're in a closet." And it's now their experience to unpack and figure out how to come out. So they're now in a position where they need to come out. So it made me think about how I can approach something with more empathy, because the coming out process for me took years. So just realizing that the process is not going to be an overnight process. It's going to take time, because now they're trapped in a closet. So that, I felt like I kind of had that in my head when I was having the conversation as well.
That sounds like it must have been really helpful, and a really good analogy, and a nice way of putting it. And so then what happened after that?
Yeah, so just to finish off on that thing, my dad ran away. He was really upset. He was very emotional. He ran away, and my mom and my sister kind of went after him, and I was just left there sitting on the coffee table being like, well, that went well. Like, that went exactly how I wanted it to. You know what? I was prepared for the worst. Like I said, I was very prepared. I had a bag packed where I had
Mm-hmm.
anything I needed. Honestly, small amounts. Obviously, as a gay man, I have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of clothes. But I had a small bag packed with my passport, and if they threw me out then and there, I was
Mm-hmm.
okay. I was okay to do that and go. So it wasn't worst case for me. Like that to me was worst case, and that never happened. Like they treated me with respect and
Mm-hmm.
love. Even though it wasn't exactly what I wanted, I was able to acknowledge that, you know what, there are so many people that do not have this good of an experience that
Mm-hmm.
I need to just sit with a little bit of gratitude and still acknowledge that I'm in pain. And I was really hurt. But I went to bed and I slept it off. And I was like, okay, I need to sleep this off and see how I feel tomorrow. And hopefully things get better tomorrow.
Wow. I'm so inspired by how you shared this whole process, because it, like, not only was it thought out, but the fact that you could sit with gratitude and then acknowledge the pain and then say to yourself, let my parents have their process. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like you gave permission for the present to just sort of take its course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the way you put that.
The present time, it just kind of took its course and you just allowed it to unfold, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's a process, definitely a process.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What a big sharing, Rahim. You know, Rahim, in the therapy room, I often find that people are in one of three places, right? So sometimes people are just getting started with an area that they want to crack into. Some are in the middle of the thick of something, and some people are looking back, trying to figure things out, or looking back as they honor the past and move into the next chapter. What part of the journey would you say that you are in? Would you say that you're looking back in the middle or just getting started?
Yeah, I would say I'm looking back in the middle for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. It feels like there's still some things that I'm unpacking with a therapist that I'm seeing, and you all do great work. Let me tell you, if everyone could have one of you, Salima, I think we'd be in a way happier place. I'm unpacking quite a bit of it with my therapist as well as with my coach, and I feel like it's almost like I thought everything was kind of taken care of, and then as
Mm-hmm.
you start sitting and you start reflecting, even this conversation it feels very much like. Therapy to me in a very beautiful way. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that the process is never done. I feel like there's always things to kind of consider and reframe and unpack. And I do think that I'm somewhere in the middle, but I have to say that, as a few years ago, I wasn't where I am today. Like there's been a lot of progress in the last little bit because I've really been putting in the work and putting in the time. And I have to
Mm-hmm.
say that it's been really beneficial to me and my soul. And I feel I feel really positive to be able to look back and to be able to share such a personal story. And
Mm-hmm.
before if I ever share this story, I would be very, very emotional because it was a very
Mm-hmm.
difficult time for me. And not that I think that there's anything wrong with being emotional. I think it's so beautiful to be able to be vulnerable, but I'm able to be vulnerable without actually feeling like the emotions of sadness. Like I don't feel the tears anymore because I'm actually quite proud of how it all went down.
Right. What would you want to remember about the process of all of the healing that sort of comes with your journey of coming out to your family?
I think what I want to remember is the fact that it's not an easy journey.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone allows themselves to really go through it the same way that I did, and I know others have. It's difficult. It's really hard to want to put yourself in that scenario to relive some of these things. And sometimes it's easier to just numb it or ignore it or push it away,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not healthy. It's not good for you in the long run. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that it shows up in so many different ways. Like when I think about even the partners I had in the past, like I would choose partners that had they had bigger problems than me. And if I had to just sit there and sort through their problems, it was like a way of distracting from my own. I didn't need to deal with my own problems because I had my hands full with theirs. It almost even impacted the partners that I selected, which impacted my mental health so much. So just looking back, I think I can remember that the process wasn't easy, but I'm so proud that I did it. And I'm so grateful that I had such amazing supports that really helped me through it, because there's good days for sure, there's bad days, but I think anything that's truly worth it, and it's meaningful to you, is something that's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy. Like
Yeah.
no great progress is made, if it comes easy. I think if you really, really want something, it's going to take work, but it's going to mean more to you when you have it.
100%. I mean, if you think about anything that you've really put your heart and soul into, just think about what the outcomes were, right?
Yeah.
And then as you settled into all of these changes, right? When did you recognize that, okay, this isn't just a thing that goes away because I've come out, like that there is maintenance work to be done, to keep things going? At what point did you recognize that, okay, this is also part of my process?
Yeah. Great question. I mean, I think a part of me just hoped that I would come out to my parents and that everything would be good and eventually they would just be okay. And then that was it. That's what I kind of thought the process would be. Like I thought, okay, well, they're going to take some time. I can do my own thing, move downtown, live my best life, and then everything will be fine. Come home for, birthdays and Christmas, and everything will be great. And I found that it wasn't great because I was so angry. I know this, the way I told the story, I had a lot of, patience and there was gratitude, but I mean, life is ups and flows. And there was moments where I was so mad, like years had gone by and I was like, wow, like no progress, like just ignoring the fact that I've come out to you, like just ignoring me. Like we would be somewhere and someone would, question why I wasn't married yet, or someone ask me a question or tell me that they wanted to set me up with a girl. And I would have my mom just be like, oh, he's focused on his studies. He's focused on work.
Right.
It's like, are you kidding? Like, what? Like, that I'm in a relationship. That I'm living with, like, I have a common law partner. And that's your reaction? Like, I used to get so agitated and upset. And I realized that it wasn't going to be something that just, I didn't have to put in any work. I could just come out and then that was it. I realized that I needed to, open the open the modes of communication, if that's the right way to say it, or I think I said floodgates earlier, but it's kind of same thing. Like I kind of had to throw it in their face and not just allow my parents to have such an easy way with it, like they could have a relationship with me and then just ignore that my partner was in my life, not meet him. Like that to me, I was like, I'm not going to make this easy for you. Like this is not going to be as easy, because then I know I'm not going to get the relationship that I want with you.
Well, it sounds like you did the work then and you're doing the work now.
Yeah.
It's really great to hear all of the details in this process. I don't always get the privilege of hearing all of the details, but this just makes it so much more personal, right? So thank you for being so open and sharing all of the details, because that really gives, I think what happens is when you tell the story, I kind of try to step into your shoes when anyone tells me a story, but specifically right now yours. And I'm just thinking like, okay, so if I was sitting on that sofa and then, I was sharing this, that, and the other, and then this is the reaction. So I was kind of like really like listening to your story while really immersing myself in. And so that's why I'm talking about the detail, because it made it so vivid for me to follow.
It was purposely done. I really wanted you to be in that living room with me. And I want everyone listening to be in that living room with me.
Of course. So Rahim, what would you say that you are grateful for with encountering this journey of your untold story?
Yeah. I think just like the title of my news headline, I think if I didn't experience this, I don't know how well I would know myself. I think who I am as a person, I know Rahim so well. Like there's not I'm so confident in who Rahim is, to a point where I'm talking about Rahim in third person right now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
know who Rahim is so well. And I think I had to learn who I was so well because I wasn't sure what parts of me were fabricated, what parts of when your identity is questioned from such a young age, it's really hard to figure out, like, do I even talk the way I do today because this is my voice, Slima, or is it because I
Mm-hmm.
pretended for so long what my voice was? Is my voice even like masculine right now? Is it masculine? If it is masculine, is it only masculine because I made it masculine? Like, there are so
Right.
many parts of myself that I had to question in my journey
Mm-hmm.
to kind of figure
Mm-hmm.
out, like, who am I? It's almost like I had to come out and then we get to learn who I was and what I wanted. And it was challenging for sure. Like, the whole process was challenging, but I just love that at this point in the game, I'm able to really help other people. Like, there's so many people that are in a very similar situation that I just described and need that support. And just to know that I can be that support for someone else, Selima, that just gives me all
Mm-hmm.
the, like, it makes it all worth it just right there. Like, that to me is like, this is my purpose. My purpose is to help people that were in a very
Mm-hmm.
similar situation,
Mm-hmm.
facing this kind of adversity, get through that process and realize that it's actually going to make you stronger. Like, I share with people
Mm-hmm.
all the time that at the time that I came out to my family, I was in, a potential promotion at work and I needed to prove myself. You mentioned that I'm an HR leader. I was
Mm-hmm.
getting a promotion as a HR manager, and it was the first
Mm-hmm.
manager title I had. And I had to have conversations where I had to discipline people, I had to terminate people, I had to have really difficult conversations. I had to be in grievance meetings and arbitrations and court
Mm-hmm.
cases, and I was so scared of all of that. And then I had this moment where I came out to my family and it became like my threshold of what I could handle. Like, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I can handle any conversation, Sima. You bring it. You need me to fire my mom? You bring her here. Bring her into my office. I have no problem right now. Like, I just became someone that was entirely fearless. And it was because of what
Mm.
I went through.
I like how you say you became fearless. It really sounds like your whole story, your whole journey of having that tough conversation that you equipped and prepared yourself and focused very clearly on, okay, this is the conversation I'm going to have with my family. I'm also hearing so clearly that it also kind of sounds like it prepared you for those other tough conversations, right? With work and those transitioning roles. And it seems like it's increased your threshold of what you can endure, right?
Absolutely. You said it better than I did.
I don't know about that. But what I do know is that these tough conversations that we have with people, or when we're facing our own life circumstance and it becomes about a tough conversation, those conversations are the great teachers. And that is life's soft skills in practice.
I love that.
Okay, we've talked about your untold story, your whole process of coming out, all of the stuff that happened that led up to your coming out, how you were affected, some of the emotions that have shown up. So the next question I'm curious about is, how has your untold story affected your mental health? Were there any mental health impacts? I know you started to mention anger. Did you experience other emotions? Did you find that anything else was part of the impacts to your mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. It's strange. The impacts were so, it's almost like I didn't even notice that they were there. But as I'm doing the work now, I'm really looking back and realizing that there were so many impacts to my mental health. I think the greatest is just this notion of, am I enough? And I think a lot of us
Mm-hmm.
grapple with this question, like, of feeling like, who, like, is truly who I am as a person, is that enough? And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult when your own family isn't happy with who you are, right? Your parents, the two
Mm-hmm.
people you want to impress the most in life, don't feel like who you are is good enough for them, that they're ashamed of you to their communities or to whoever. And that can be really, really hard on a person's, sense of confidence. And I think that it showed up in so many different ways. Like, in work, it would show up where I would be assigned a project, and all of a sudden I felt like almost like this crippling anxiety that I couldn't get this small project done that is like literally something I could easily do. It showed up in relationships. I kind of touched on that, and like choosing partners that didn't treat me very well, which led to a lot of mental health stuff as well too, right? It was kind of a snowball effect a little bit. I talked a lot about a little bit of excessive drinking. See how funny that sounds? I talked about of drinking at some point because it was just my means of coping and my means of almost self-medicating. I developed this weird anxiousness in the morning that I would feel, where I would wake up and I'd be in the shower and I would think about my boss potentially firing me, or I would just like, I would take things to this like extreme level. It developed
like
this
worst case scenario sort of
worst
thoughts.
case. Yes, exactly that. And I developed this like cough where I would almost make myself like I would almost throw up because I would like gag from this nervous cough that I had. And I just thought thing that I did, I thought, maybe it's just a health thing. Maybe I should go get that looked out. And as a guy, I put that off too. I was like, no, I need to go to the doctor. And I realized through therapy and through working with a coach that it was anxiety that I was feeling from these, my coming out process, that whole experience of really figuring out who it is that I am. So a lot of it is kind of tied to that I'm working through at this moment. Yeah.
Well, first of all, this battle with self-limiting beliefs that you talk about, okay, that really sucked. Okay. But I hope you know now that, you really are enough. I hope you know that now. I'm so sorry that you didn't know that then, but I'm really hopeful that you know that now.
Thank you. And I that means a lot to me. Thank you for saying that. And I do know that I feel like I'm enough and then some. Like I feel like I've been so much then some that it's interesting that I didn't even see the enough part, but I see abundance. I see way more.
That's even better. And all of that seeking approval and all of the emotional pain that was inflicted on you. I know you talked about, the excessive drinking, the numbing, the self-medicating, developing this worst case scenario cough, your anxious cough. It just goes to show that even if you don't have a mental health diagnosis, that yes, your mental health does get impacted and your body can only tolerate so much. So it's like a somatic response, right? Your body is telling you that you're ignoring me. There's stuff you're not paying attention to. So what do I need to do to get your attention? Let me give you this fancy cough and you figure it out and see what you can do now, right? And so it sounds like you really worked the process. And it's important that you acknowledge that, because you don't have to have a mental health issue to have your mental health impacted. Because to me, in my world, I see like mental health and physical health as two equals, and they go hand in hand, right?
To be honest, yeah, that's such a great way of putting it. And I mean, I didn't realize that that's what was happening, but absolutely my body was telling me like, deal with this, deal with it now. So yeah.
Right. So Rahim, what's your key messages to the listeners of our show?
My key message to everyone listening, and number one, thank you all for listening to us. This is so great. My key message is to just know that it's a process. It's going to take time. There's no quick fixes in life, unfortunately, or fortunately. I think that a big part of why I feel so confident as a person and I am such a good coach today is because of what I went through. And I think what we go through really helps to shape us. It helps us figure out what our life's purpose is. There's so many great things that are there. There's really a silver lining in everything. And I think some people get really upset when they hear the term silver lining, or it bothers them. But you know what? I've learned to not let it bother me. I've learned to also not let it minimize what I'm going through. But at the same time, I've learned that there is a blessing in everything. And I think for you listening to my story, and for anyone who has a very similar story with, being afraid to come out or being afraid to really explore who they are, just know that when you're ready, there's so much support out there and it truly gets better. Like, I know that's such a cliche saying, but I I love cliche sayings. Like, it gets better. And I can share that I don't think I really closed the story, but with my parents right now, I didn't make it easy for them. I really tried to push on them what I needed. And
Mm-hmm.
they, for Christmas this year, came over and they visited me and my family, and they got to meet my partner Dylan for the first time. And my
Mm-hmm.
dad and Dylan had such an amazing conversation. And my dad now asks about Dylan. He
Mm-hmm.
makes food and sends it and makes sure Dylan tried it. And like, this relationship that I just never thought that I would have with
Mm-hmm.
my father,
Right.
I got. And it happened because I didn't stop believing that it was possible.
Yeah, you didn't stop believing and you never gave up. You didn't even bail on yourself. You stayed after that, that seventh inning stretch in baseball.
I didn't. I had my popcorn still in my hand. My hot dog
Right.
was still intact. I
Yeah.
was there.
Yeah, you didn't run away at the seventh inning stretch. You stayed put. But yeah, I hear the belief in yourself. You didn't give up. So between the determination and the perseverance, it shows. And yeah, there's your rainbow, right? Your family, the whole family, all
The
parts
whole
of it.
family, all of it,
Mm-hmm.
including the dog. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious now. What's your game changer inspiration that is close to you that reflects your untold story? Is there like a quote or a book or something?
Something that comes to mind for me, and I spent a little bit of time talking about how my exes were so terrible, but it's actually a quote that
Mm-hmm.
one of my exes said to me, and it really resonates with me. And it's, people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And this quote was important in many different areas, but really stood out to me when it came to my parents, because I thought that I could just abandon them because I was
Mm-hmm.
so afraid of them abandoning me, that
Mm-hmm.
I needed to do it first. And I would always say, like, you guys are my chosen family. I would say this to my friends. I would say, you're my
Mm-hmm.
chosen family. Like, I don't believe blood is thicker than water. I would say all these things because I was so fearful that my parents would disown me that I, like I said, disowned them. But I realized that, especially through a pandemic, through everything that's going on, that
Mm-hmm.
family is going to be there forever, regardless of
Mm-hmm.
what your relationship might be right now. And it is important to set boundaries and do all that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, like,
Mm-hmm.
just knowing that people are there for a whole lifetime means that you're going to go through different things with them. And it's up to
Mm-hmm.
us to decide, what position that person's going to play in their life. And
Mm-hmm.
at this point, I never really lost sight of what my parents were going to mean to me in my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really great that you have this quote that you keep to you and that you remind yourself of, because I think it's important to remember that family, they are there and they're there for the lifetime. They're there for the long haul, right?
Mm-hmm. Whether you like it or not, they're there. They ain't going anywhere.
When you were describing all of this, you mentioned a lot of things with just talking about this quote, and it just seems like, it's as if you were able to let go, to let in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just think this whole idea of you not giving up, you didn't give up. And even though it was a bit of a struggle for it was more than a big little amount of struggle, right? For you and for your family, but neither side gave up.
Yeah, you're right.
So, Rahim, what is a cause or an organization that has been impactful to you on this journey that you'd like to give a shout out to?
The one that really comes to mind for me, and so I recently posted kind of like my coming out story on Instagram, and I had a bunch of people reach out to me, and there were a few people that reached out, and they are from countries where they aren't able to come out. It's not even the fact that they don't want to and that
Mm-hmm.
they're not comfortable, it's that they actually cannot. And
Mm-hmm.
an organization that me and my partner Dylan feel so strongly about, we marched with them during Pride, and it's really important that we donate money to them, is Rainbow Railroad. They are a great organization that are based out of Toronto, and they work with any individuals that are part of the LGBTQ plus community that
Mm-hmm.
facing persecution where they are, and they work with immigration to help them flee and get them over to Canada so they can live a life where they can have all the beautiful luxuries that, the rest of us that are part of this community are able to have here in Canada. So if you haven't, any of our listeners, if you haven't heard of the organization Rainbow Railroad, please check them out. They're such a wonderful organization within my community.
Wow. I mean, thank you for sharing that resource. I love learning about resources. This is one that I didn't know about, kind of feeling a little embarrassed that I don't, but at the same time, I just don't know all the resources. And I'm really grateful that you've shared this because this seems like such a great initiative. I mean, it's unfortunate that people in other countries are facing prosecution and everything else that they must be going through. I can't imagine, but that there's an initiative in Canada where there's hope bringing them into Canada and having them be able to live their life. That's really great.
Yeah, it's a beautiful organization.
Yeah, really beautiful. I'm going to keep that on my resource list now. So, how can people connect with you? How are you findable? If someone wants to connect with you, perhaps your story inspired them or they have a question to ask you, what's the best ways for people to be in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, I would love for any of you to reach out to me. Obviously, any feedback is so amazing. It's such a gift. And, even just knowing that anyone would want to reach out to me, just that in itself feels so beautiful. And I'm so humbled. There's so many different ways on my Instagram, which I'm sure you're going to post, but my website as well, too, is a nice way to get to know me. And there's some pictures that I've attached to my story so you can see myself and my family that I kind of talked about a lot. And that's rahimprinter.com. Instagram, LinkedIn as well too, if that's your jam. I'm available. Facebook as well too. That's where I'm at.
Okay, so we've got your website, rahimprinter.com, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at rahimprinter, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Rahim, you just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. And your first podcast. And like I said, you never forget your first. So thank you so much, Salima.
No, honestly, Rahim, I'm just so happy that you came on to the program and that you are giving other people that opportunity to recognize that it's okay to share and that sharing is possible and permission to share. And I just want to say it takes courage to share what you've shared today, despite being in the place of, looking back to being in the middle for what you mentioned before. I'm just grateful for your willingness to do this. You showed up with so much clarity of mind and walking us step by step through your journey. That was really intimate.
Thank you. And thank you for making me feel so comfortable. You're so great at creating space. And honestly, I felt so wonderful sharing with you. And I feel like I need to pay you per hour because I feel like I just had a free therapy session. I feel amazing. Thank you.
Hilarious. Thank you again, Rahim, for being a part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. Thank you so much for being here today. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.